Hey, twisted people. It's your girl here, Chauncey K. Robinson, aka Twisted Woman CKR. Horror Battle Royale tonight, y'all. It's 6 rounds. Michael Myers versus these 6 lovely, not so lovely individuals. The Nun, Chucky, Jason, Freddy Krueger, Annabelle, and Pinhead. The way it's going to go is that we have a list of criteria that I will be going through with each one. We're going to share some fun clips that I have, maybe some extra clips if I randomly remember a scene that I want to show from one of them. But we're going to be doing box office. We're going to be comparing the lore and the origin of each one, the powers, kills, weaknesses, the adversary, their main adversary in their movies, and in that way, it's like comparing just how cool or strong their adversary is compared to each other. We're also going to do the quality of the movies, and the way that I will be doing the quality of the movies will be through Rotten Tomatoes, basically a kind of a average of all their movies put together and the average score that each franchise gets, and then also compare it to my own thoughts when it comes to the quality. But I'll weight it more to the Rotten Tomatoes one, since I know one individual person can be a little bit subjective unless I have a really strong opinion on the quality of the franchises that are being compared. And finally, the physical fight itself. If it was a physical fight, based off of what we know about these villains, who would come out the victor? So that's the criteria that we're rolling with today. First up, we're going to talk about Michael Myers, the man himself. So let's go over, and I want you to debate me. I want you to tell me, oh my gosh, you are so wrong, blah, 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 whatever. If you feel that way, not just being contrarian to be, because I'm sure you all are going to have your opinions about these characters and this battle. Michael Myers himself. All right. So when it comes to Michael Myers, I want to start with a little clip of him. He is the shape. He is the man himself. And he actually, people may know I have a little bit of a bias when it comes to, I got a bias against Michael Myers sometimes, but I thought he would be kind of the perfect one because it's such a historic, iconic franchise, Simplicity, right? Dr. Loomis!
And then another 7 trying to keep him locked up.
One of the most badasses of horror. Laurie Strode, of course. And this is very old school, right? I mean, this is also before we kind of understood what the heck he was. Although I contend in the first and second one, he was a human. His box office, in terms of how much he has made, Michael Myers, the Halloween franchise, is considered one of the, if not the, although I do think it's a little bit of debate, I'll talk about that when I get to one of his challengers, is considered the highest grossing horror franchise, coming in, when you take into consideration inflation, with $800 million made worldwide. So Michael Myers has made $800 million worldwide in terms of a franchise, making him one of the highest if not the highest grossing horror franchise out there. So now the lore of Michael Myers, this is where I think is one of his biggest weaknesses. I'm just going to be honest. I think it's one of his biggest weaknesses because I don't think they ever decided what his lore really was. But using the resource of the Wiki fandom, childhood. Michael Myers was born on October 19th, 1957. He had an elder sister named Judith and a younger sister. That's what we know, although it's debatable on whether or not it was Laurie, depending on which timeline you pay attention to. By 1963, when Michael Myers was 6 years old, he claimed to have suffered from bizarre inexplicable nightmares and heard a voice in his head that would tell him to do things. The voices tell me to say I hate people, says Michael. His dreams were filled with images of actual events that took place several centuries ago at the dawn of the Celtic Age. Now, this origin story depends on which timeline you're going through, but that's what we're dealing with here. Now, on October 31st, 1963, Michael committed his first act of murder. His parents were away and he was at home with his sister Judith, who was supposed to be babysitting him, but cared more about spending an intimate moment with her boyfriend Danny. After Danny left, Michael, dressed in a clown costume, went into the kitchen, picked up a kitchen knife, walked up the steps and stabbed Judith to death. He then quietly walked back downstairs, front yard, and we saw the iconic scene, Michael, what are you doing? And then later on, he breaks out, and that's when the tale of terror happens, October 30th, 1978. So his origin story, I feel like one could argue, is maybe his weakest part, and let me know if you agree, but I do think his origin story is the weakest part because, one, in the meta aspect of it, you actually don't know which one to really follow. I think in this particular case, it's kind of like, well, I like the idea of the cult, so let's go with the cult that made him do this, because he was the one, because I think the thing with the Celtic cult or something was that each generation, one kid is picked to kill their family or something for the sacrifice. And then another thing is just maybe he's just demonic and evil, right? So, there's that. So I do think it's his weakest point. So I think that might come into a problem with his other challengers who, depending on how you see it, might have stronger lore than Michael Myers himself. But let me know if you guys agree. Now let's talk about his powers, which are also debatable, but I think they've stayed consistent. I think they stay consistent, right? His powers, he has superhuman strength for the most part. He has stealth. He's very quiet. He's very quiet. He has stealth. He has endurance. I mean, talk about someone who never really dies, even though by all accounts, depending on his actual thing, he should be dead. And he has high intelligence. I would argue that Michael Myers is very smart. He's very intelligent. And his durability has unknown limits. Like, we don't know because he gets killed and he doesn't die. So there's that. He cannot die. I put a question mark next to this, though, because I don't know if that's actually true. But for all intents and purposes, one could argue that he is immortal. Teleportation. I would argue, and let me know if you agree, can Michael Myers teleport? 1 minute he is there, the next minute he's not. And you can't explain how he got to the other end. One could argue maybe he can also teleport. He's terrifying. He can be very terrifying. And it's almost like he knows she's not in that, but he's kind of messing with her. And it's like, I want to, like, the fact that she's like, excuse me, someone in here after he did all of that. Come on, girl. You're not creeped out? What's going on here? Oh. I just feel some type of way that she kept going to the bathroom during this. Like, come on, seriously. Someone does all that, just stands there. You go about, oh, excuse me, someone's in here. So we saw his powers, right? So let's talk about the quality. Now, I think this is where it can get a little weird. So let's guess the average median score on Rotten Tomatoes for all of the Michael Myers, the Halloween franchise. It is 37% on Rotten Tomatoes, the average score. And that, I will admit that some of that is because certain movies just got really low scores. And when you do the average, like 2018 did really well. I think 80%. I think 2018 got 80%. But then you had one of the other ones, I think Curse of Michael Myers, got like 14%. But I definitely wouldn't put it in the B or A range. I would put it in a C range for a franchise. So that's kind of my honest thing. But let me know what y'all think, if you would give it, in terms of grades, if you would give it a C, an A through F. How many kills do you think Michael Myers, over the course of his movies, has done? Now, this is an estimate because depending on if you include the Rob Zombie ones, it's a little bit lower, right? Not that much lower, but around an estimate of how many kills do you think Michael Myers has done in the course of his franchise? The estimated kill count of Michael Myers is 160. So before Halloween Kills, it was around the 120 mark. After it got a lot higher. So there's that. Okay, so then we have the adversaries. His main adversaries are, in my opinion, Laurie Strode, Dr. Samuel Loomis, and depending on which timeline you pay attention to, his niece, Jamie Lloyd. But a lot of people just forget about Jamie, so I guess we can too. One, Michael Myers can feel pain, okay? He can feel pain. We know that. He may not die from the pain, but we have seen over and over again that he can be hurt. You can hurt him, right? Decapitation, I think kind of works. I think decapitation works. That's what Laurie did in H2O until they made it so it wasn't really him that got decapitated. But I would argue that if he lost his head, he'd probably die. And I'm going to go with H2O for saying that. Let me know if you agree or not. And then finally, I think his weakness is also family members and nostalgia. There's a lot going on in Michael Myers' head. And depending on which timeline and which movie you belong to, the family aspect was really a big thing for a lot of his movies until the 2018 version. So I kept that on the list of his weaknesses. So we are going to go to his first battle, which is, we're going to go to Michael Myers' first battle, which is Chucky. All right, y'all, place your bets or your bits or your whatever you want to place on who you think is going to win in terms of this first round of Michael Myers versus Chucky, or Charles Lee Ray. And Chucky has, how much do y'all think Chucky has in box office taken in all of his films? We know there's been a number of films. I think there's about 6 Child's Play films, and I am including the remake, even though technically Charles Lee Ray wasn't Chucky in that, but I wanted to give him this extra movie because I thought, why not? Chucky has $334 million. You were close, Damon. You were actually very close. You were probably the closest one. So what we know with that is that out of the two of them, Michael Myers would take this round. Michael Myers is the victor when it comes to box office, because there's a total of like 8 rounds within this, right? It's like Price is Right. Yeah, just you bet a little bit higher, right? It's 220, 250, 301. That's funny. Okay, so we have that for the box office. So now let's talk a little bit about Chucky. Let's talk about our man of the hour, or our doll of the hour. And of course, I'm going to start with a little clip of our man in his origin glory.
Everyone has a birthday they'll always remember.
Can we open my presents now, Mommy? A good guy! I knew it! Hi, I'm Chucky.
He's something, isn't he?
This
He's
is
something,
Andy's.
isn't he?
Time for bed, Andy. Good night, baby.
Good night, Aunt Maggie. Good night, Chucky.
Everyone knows most accidents happen at home.
How did that happen?
This is no accident.
Andy!
I'm Detective Mike Norris. Homicide.
Andy!
Miss Peterson's dead, Miss Barkley. She fell from the kitchen window.
Someone's moved in with the Barkley family. And so has terror.
Mommy, I know who was on the counter. Andy!
Who, Andy?
Chucky.
Nobody believes you about Chucky.
You're my friend to the end, Heidi Ho.
Oh, for God's sake.
Why won't you believe me?
Because I'm sane, Mrs. Barkley. Sane and rational.
No one believes the truth. Or lives to tell it. There's nothing nice about murder.
Can we appreciate the narration in this?
About child's play.
Can we appreciate that narrative? I really do miss old school trailers where you had a person talking over it. So great. So good. Just good stuff. Right? Great title, right? Just awesome title. Definitely a classic. I actually watched this when I was a kid behind my mom's back and was terrified of dolls. I would imagine, oh my gosh, you watched this when you were a kid? Oh my gosh. I'm not even gonna lie, I watched it too when I was a kid. So I'm like, well, but like once I ended up watching it on TV, but like, yes, I definitely, I used to have this doll that was a prayer doll. It was a doll that taught you how to pray. Kind of like a Raggedy Ann doll, but she was black, and she was the cutest thing. And I used to draw on her though, but it was a doll that taught you how to pray because like her hands were Velcro together and stuff like that. And I remember when I was watching Child's Play, and I used to be, I wasn't mean to my toys, but I used to put them in, I used to kind of, throw them and stuff like that. And I remember I kind of stopped doing that and realizing these things could come to life. That Puppet Master, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to not do that anymore. It definitely teaches you lessons. So let's talk about the lore of Chucky, y'all. Let's talk about Chucky's lore. So Chucky, Charles Lee Ray is the main antagonist, right? He was into voodoo. He was definitely into the voodoo. Who knew he was into the voodoo? And he was once called the Lakeshore Strangler. Before Charles Lee Ray got into the good guy doll, he was a Lakeshore Strangler. And at the time, I believe in the original movie, it was known that he had killed 22 people. So he already had a body count before he became the doll. So we have that as well. And then, he practiced voodoo and he ended up possessing a doll. So a doll where, if you go by the logic of the first one, if he's in the doll too long, he starts to become human and gets trapped in the doll. But he can possess another human to transfer his soul to the doll if he doesn't get out of it. Now, eventually in the franchise, they ended up making it so that Chucky kind of liked being a doll. They made him make that choice, and so he just stayed as a doll, which made him very vulnerable in staying as a doll. So Chucky has a very good lore, if you ask me. In my opinion, a little bit of a better lore than Michael Myers, just because of the whole setup of it. He transfers his soul. It's very distinct. It's very cut and clear, and I think it just kind of adds a lot of other layers to it. Let me know if you agree, but I believe when it comes to the lore and origin story, Chucky beats Michael Myers. So far we have Michael Myers beating Chucky at the box office and Chucky beating Michael Myers when it comes to lore. Now let's go to the powers. Now, Chucky, and let me know if you think I missed one, but I think his three main powers is possession, voodoo magic, and stealth. I mean, do I have to explain the stealth? I mean, he's a friggin' doll. Most people don't see him coming. He can run and hide under things. I mean, yeah, he's pretty good with that. So stealth is definitely one of his main things. The voodoo magic, which became, just a big thing in that. A big power that he does have, though, is his power of possession. I think the power of possession really works for him, as we saw later on in the franchise, where not only was it just like, because that was his biggest gripe was, right? It was like trying to get into another body. But eventually he ended up taking shards of his soul, like in Cult of Chucky and Seed of Chucky and all of that, and basically being able to place it into other dolls and other people. So that's pretty cool, if he's allowed to do that, to be able to go against other characters. Now, does that matter when it comes to going against Michael Myers? But we'll talk about that in the actual fight. Now, I want to know y'all thoughts on this, though. Versus powers, in terms of power structure, now, I have it so I actually will say, in terms of powers, I gave it to Michael Myers in this regard. Mainly because I just feel like if Michael got a hold of Chucky just once, he'd rip him apart. Because he does have multiple, Chucky can literally make an army of himself. He has made an army of himself, which is pretty big. Okay, so in terms of powers, I'm going to give it, in terms of powers, I'm going to give it to Michael Myers. Okay, so kills. How many kills do you think Chucky has? So kills, 94 with, you're guessing 94? 150 plus kills. Wow, you think Chucky really got around? Well, okay. Oh, y'all going high with these. It's funny because I feel like y'all undersold Michael, but y'all are going super high with Chucky. That's funny. Josh is saying 105. Damon is saying 185. Wow, okay. And counting each of who is killed in the movies. And I also counted the 22 people that Charles Lee Ray was said to have killed before he became Chucky. If you count these numbers together, you get 70 kills. Yep, it's 70. So it's kind of low. So in that regard, Michael Myers beats Chucky when it comes to kills. One of my fave ones. They're just kind of brutal.
Glad. Why is that, John?
Turning human.
What?
More time you spend in that body, more human you become.
You mean I have to live out the rest of my life in this body? No fucking way! You got me into this, you get me out.
And you have to be stopped.
Now, why would he tell him he's gonna stop him? But okay.
I thought something like this might happen.
Oh!
Shouldn't tell your customers where you hide things like this, John. Your choice.
No, I'll tell you.
Have a date with death.
Oh!
So long, John.
I'm also gonna, in terms of weaknesses for Chucky, the doll can be destroyed, and he's trapped in a doll, which makes him vulnerable. So in that regard, I gave it to Michael Myers in terms of that. Now, in terms of adversaries, now Chucky's main adversary through a good chunk of the franchise has been Andy, and I think he's very similar to Laurie in this regard, having been traumatized by the person you dealt with and your whole life being thrown off. And I feel like Andy and Laurie have very similar kind of origin stories of their own in terms of how they came to be obsessed with who they kill. I even said as much for the Chucky series that have, and mind you, I actually am not counting the Chucky kills in the Chucky series. Even if I did, though, he'd still be low. But I'm not counting that. I'm counting the movie franchises. So in that regard, I made it tied because I think Andy is a badass and I think Laurie's a badass. So I did give them both the check when it came to Michael Myers in terms of cool adversaries. In terms of a physical fight, I gave it to Michael Myers because, well, like I said, I feel like if Michael's persistent, he's immortal. I feel like if he got a hold of Chucky, even if there was a whole bunch of dolls, he's also patient. I feel like he'd be able to, take Chucky out. So, out of this, Michael Myers versus Chucky, who wins? Well, if we tally the results, Michael Myers wins in box office. Chucky wins in lore. Michael Myers wins in powers, kills, weaknesses, adversaries, and the physical fight. So in that regard, it's 1 to all of that. So basically, Michael Myers has taken out Chucky.